So the gloves are off. There is no holding back anymore. Sony and Microsoft are straight up just fist fighting at this point for supremacy in the Activision Blizzard deal that is supposed to happen next year in the summer, and Nintendo's just peacefully watching. There has been a lot that has come out about this. First of all, Sony is felt incredibly threatened by this. There's multiple articles of how they feel this is going to hurt the industry, although really most of them are pretty baseless. But we're going to take a look at them. So Sony claims that Xbox's Activision deal could hurt developers and lead to price rises, which is insane from them because Sony has like literally raised prices of everything, even though they don't have to, right? They charge $70 games, even though these games are not PS5 only. They're cross-gen games that are being upgraded to PS5, which doesn't really make sense to charge people $70 for, because imagine if I was playing like Overwatch, right? If I'm playing Overwatch, if I go to my settings and want to up the graphics on Overwatch or up the graphics on Sonic Frontiers, imagine if I go to do that and it says, ooh, sorry, that's going to be a $10 upcharge if you want to make the graphics better. Like, that really doesn't make sense from them to, to do that and then say, hey, we're worried about the, consumer friendliness. Like, that's ridiculous. They also are... they're saying they're confident that the UK regulator will seek to block the acquisition. I don't know why they feel confident about that at all, because there is really no precedence for them to block this acquisition. And Microsoft has crossed their T's and dotted their I's, so we'll see how that works out. But let's take a look at this article. This is from VGC. The UK regulator recently expanded its investigation into the $68.7 billion deal due to a number of antitrust concerns, which outlined in a statement published in mid-October. Notably, it said it was worried about the impact it could have on PlayStation's ability to compete, even though they are literally first in the market by a wide margin, given that the merger would see Microsoft gain ownership of Call of Duty and the entire series. In a newly published response to the CMA statement, Sony has expressed confidence that the regulator will conclude the merger is likely to result in a substantial lessening of competition and therefore should be blocked. This is not going to... I highly doubt this is going to happen, because Microsoft is third place right now, and if you look at the way the market is going, even if you fold Activision Blizzard and anything else into Microsoft, they're still third place. The platform holder claims that if Microsoft were to gain sole control of Activision's content, independent developers would all be harmed, and Microsoft could increase prices for games, hardware, and subscriptions. This is kind of a ridiculous take too, because Activision Blizzard being under Microsoft doesn't mean they're going to raise the price for Call of Duty. And then ironically, the developers that have raised prices for their games is Sony. So yeah, this is again kind of baseless. Sony Interactive Entertainment is confident that the CMA's Phase 2 inquiry will confirm that the transaction is likely to be substantially lessen the competition and should be prohibited, it said. So they're just saying that, like, you guys are going to see this is way too much. This would hurt the gaming industry. Don't let it happen. Sony goes on to argue that Call of Duty is irreplaceable, although it's ironic because, if you look at Call of Duty and saying it's irreplaceable, I mean, Overwatch 2 also has, heavy player counts. Destiny 2 has heavy player counts. I wouldn't say Call of Duty is irreplaceable, but it's definitely the top dog in terms of FPS and just general mass players. It says that Call of Duty is irreplaceable and that Microsoft's ownership of it would tip the balance of power so heavily in its favor, ultimately PlayStation might not be able to compete. This is just pathetic. You're telling me that Call of Duty is going to make the difference between Microsoft being third place and first place. That's not going to happen. Even Call of Duty is not that big. Microsoft would control irreplaceable content which drives user engagement. Again, the two arguments to debunk this is you could just say, first of all, make your own game. Second of all, we're not even exclusivizing Call of Duty to Xbox. It wrote, post-transaction, Microsoft would control Activision content which drives redacted times as user engagement on PlayStation more than all of Sony Interactive Entertainment's best first-party titles put together. The reason why they say this statement, because it sounds pretty bad, they're saying that Call of Duty has more player engagement than every single first-party PlayStation game combined. That's because they make games that are single-player games that only people play for a certain amount of time. So I bet you if you were to lump Destiny 2 into the fold, the numbers would be much closer. And that's because Sony doesn't make games that have replayability. They only make single-player games. So that's kind of their own fault. While Microsoft recently claimed it had offered Sony a deal that would keep the series on PlayStation for a decade, which literally could solve everything, Sony argues that post-transaction, Microsoft would have the ability to incentivize or exclude or restrict rivals, including PlayStation and PlayStation Plus, from having access to Call of Duty. Even though, what's hilarious about this too, and again, I'm really debunking this because Sony is coming off as really pathetic here, and I have nothing against Sony and I have nothing for Microsoft, but just based off of the facts, this is pretty pathetic from Sony. Sony argues that they could keep COD off of PlayStation, but what's hilarious is Sony actually has exclusive deals to keep exclusive content from Call of Duty only on PlayStation. So this whole idea of you can't control Call of Duty, Sony's had the rights to Call of Duty for years now, where they get first maps first, they get game modes. They literally had a game mode in Cold War that was exclusive to their platform for an entire year. You don't think people bought a PlayStation over an Xbox because of that? Come on. And now you're gonna cry wolf when the shoe's on the other foot. Stop. The article goes on to say, according to a statement during its initial inquiries, the CMA gathered data showing that Activision and Microsoft's games account for 30 to 40% of all the minutes played on consoles in the UK. If Microsoft were to gain sole control of Activision's content, Sony argues that consumers and competitors and independent developers would all be harmed. In the midterm, a significant number of PlayStation users would likely switch to Xbox or Game Pass, which is the point of them buying it. Faced with weaker competition, Microsoft would be able to increase console and game prices for Xbox users, including those that switch from PlayStation, to increase the price of Game Pass and reduce innovation and quality. This is a fanboy argument. They're basically saying that once they do get Activision Blizzard, they'll become the top dog, and then they'll raise prices, and then they'll reduce quality. Microsoft has been the most consumer-friendly company. I think out of every major company, they're the most consumer-friendly company, and they've stood by that. Even when they have had, PlayStation themselves are going to go on to say in this article that they have significant advantage with Game Pass, but they are trying to make their games a better quality. Phil Spencer is not the type of guy to do this. So it's pretty ironic that Sony's saying that. The article goes on to say, Microsoft's foreclosure strategy would lock in many consumers to Xbox, including existing Xbox users who play Call of Duty and those switching from PlayStation to play Call of Duty. These locked-in users would become less likely to switch in response to any pro-competitive actions in Sony's part. So basically they're saying once you get Call of Duty, even if we make the best types of games, nobody's going to switch because Call of Duty's that big. And again, this is just not a true statement. Okay, Call of Duty is a big game, but it's not the only game people play. In fact, really the only people who play Call of Duty at this point are casuals. And yes, casuals are, there's a lot of casuals, but at the end of the day, there's still a significant amount of people who play games other than Call of Duty. So yeah, that's basically the article. I mean, they're literally saying that they can't compete with Microsoft if Xbox goes through with this deal, and that's just a ridiculous take. I want to actually show some other things too, right? So this is what Xbox has said in response. Xbox said, and this is by the way, like I said, the gloves are off. They're basically just throwing punches at each other, and Xbox even is self-embarrassing themselves to get this deal done. Microsoft admits that many PlayStation exclusives are better quality than those on Xbox, which is insane for them to admit publicly. But Microsoft has admitted that Sony has more exclusive games that are better quality than its own. The statement comes in the documents pertaining to Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. In Microsoft's response to the CMA issues statement, it claims that the proposed merger is pro-competitive due to Sony's standing as the dominant platform holder, which they have been for 2 decades now. And on top of that, I don't know why this ad is blocking this, but they say, here we go. In addition to being the dominant console provider, Sony is also a powerful game publisher, reads the statement for Microsoft. Sony is roughly the equivalent in size to Activision and nearly double the size of Microsoft's game publishing business. Sony's exclusive first-party franchises, including God of War, Last of Us, and recently acquired Destiny 2, are described as iconic, and they're right. Sony owns God of War, The Last of Us, Spider-Man, and Destiny 2 now. There were, oh, and by the way, Phil Spencer, which is this ironic that he says Destiny 2, because if you like check Phil Spencer's Xbox profile, he has like 1,000 hours played on Destiny 2. He actually really loves that game. But yeah, later in the document, to prove the merger would have no anti-competitive effect, Microsoft states that Sony has more exclusive games than Microsoft, many of which are better quality. Both Sony and Nintendo's exclusive first-party games rank among the best-selling in Europe and worldwide, it reads. Currently, Sony's exclusive content includes prominent first-party titles, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, Spider-Man. It also suggests that Sony has entered into arrangements with third-party publishers which require the exclusion of Xbox from the set of platforms just so they can get their games distributed only on PlayStation. That's literally what the statement is saying. Like, they're saying, listen, there's no way us buying Activision Blizzard is going to be anti-competitive for them because you guys have the best first-party games. Nintendo also has the best first-party games. You guys also pay other publishers like Square Enix for Final Fantasy 16, for example, to not, put your games on Xbox. Like, there have been straight-up times where Sony has said, hey, we will pay you money so that you don't put it on Xbox. Now they're crying about competition. This is ridiculous on Sony's part. I really, really hope this deal goes through, and I'm confident it will, because there's no way, like, they have a clear argument for, like, the reason why it shouldn't. They actually list examples, too, as the games of, that Sony paid to not have on Xbox. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Bloodborne, Final Fantasy 16, Silent Hill 2 are among the examples of games that Sony has exclusivized to their platform, even though they don't own the publisher. It's also claimed that console exclusives account for a higher percentage of global game sales for PlayStation rather than Xbox, though specific figures have been removed. It's suggested that for Nintendo, these proportions would be even higher due to the importance of Nintendo's exclusive first-party portfolio. This is true. Nintendo relies more on first-party games than anybody else. I mean, Pokemon's literally just their biggest launch ever. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, no game is sold faster. It's literally their biggest launch ever. And that game was bugged all to hell. So that just goes to show you how important Pokemon means to Nintendo, Mario means to Nintendo, and all these other games. Sony is the same way, but they're just less successful at it because they are also a third-party platform. So, it's implausible that Sony, the leading console with more than a 2-to-1 lead, would be foreclosed as a result of not having access to a single franchise, the document claims, specifically referring to Call of Duty. Microsoft additionally comments on Nintendo's exclusive games, claiming it offers a broader range of mature content than Xbox. The CMA has mischaracterized the Nintendo Switch as being predominantly for families, such as, this characterization. It just reflects the fact that, Microsoft is trying to monopolize the market when in reality Switch also has a bunch of mature adult games. And then, there is literally, just no punches being pulled here. They are going absolutely crazy to try. Like, Sony is basically going just fanboy, hey, you can't let them buy COD because what'll happen to us? If you take this dude right here, MBG, is a PlayStation content creator. He only, does PlayStation stuff. And even he is literally, now he says both Sony and Microsoft look pathetic, but he's saying that he is kind of a fanboy, I'm not going to lie to you. But he's saying Microsoft looks pathetic. In no way does Microsoft look pathetic. Sony absolutely looks pathetic, right? Sony desperately trying to downplay their own success, being hypocritical publicly out of fear of losing COD. That is exactly what Sony is doing. They are downplaying their own success and being hypocritical because they're scared of losing COD. And then he goes on to say Microsoft dumping on their own games and studios so they can buy a successful publisher they played no part in building up. Again, this is a stupid take because they aren't dumping on their own games. They're straight up saying Sony has the better exclusive games. That's not dumping on your own games. That's taking accountability for the fact that Xbox has not been making good exclusive games. Microsoft is trying to right the ship by buying studios. They're also building their own studios. They built up, the initiative and stuff like that, 343. But yeah, this is insane to me that, it's come down to this for both parties. I think that overall this is going to result in more investigation, but the deal is still going to close in the summer of 2023 because, like I said, when push comes to shove, when the regulators ask themselves, hey, do we cancel this? I do not think they're going to say yes. I don't think so. So this is Jez Corden. The FTC may try to win concessions like Call of Duty in perpetuity, but there's little precedent for this to get blocked for Xbox. that is the big thing. There's little precedent. Like what are they going to say that's like, okay, we have to, because of this we have to cancel the entire thing. I just don't think it's gonna happen. I really do think that this deal is going to go through. And again, I don't play Call of Duty that much. I play Overwatch a lot. I'm not sitting here like shilling for Xbox. Like if it's on wherever, I would rather have no exclusive games and everybody shares everything rather than have exclusive games. But yeah, I mean, listen, like it's pretty insane to me that this is what it's come to, though, because I do think that overall, like, this is just a horrible look for Sony. Even people in Sony's camp are like shocked that they're saying this, right? They're downplaying their own success. But yeah, I mean, this is just insane. They're not pulling any punches here, and it's just wild to me that it's come down to this. You're talking about Activision Blizzard. You're talking about Call of Duty. And by the way, this is the Nintendo thing. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold 10 million copies in the first 3 days of release. That is more than God of War Ragnarok by 5 million. That is insane. And this is a game. This is probably the worst Pokemon game they've put out there. And it sold 5 million more than God of War Ragnarok. That's how much exclusives mean to Nintendo, and then obviously to Sony. So yeah, like the idea that Sony's gonna sit here and play, oh, woe is me, what are we gonna do if we lose COD? Like, just stop it, man. This was an interesting headline too. Sony claims Microsoft's true strategy is to make PlayStation like Nintendo. The company argues that Xbox will become the home of FPS games if the Activision deal is approved. Obviously, this is ironic because they have Destiny 2 under their belt, which is an FPS game, but that's hilarious. So, Sony has claimed Microsoft's true strategy behind the proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard is to have PlayStation become like Nintendo and not compete in the 18-rated shooter space. Now, this is a ridiculous take because Bungie is now officially owned by PlayStation, and they have one of the best successful first-person shooters, period, in Destiny 2. PlayStation also owns first-person shooters, but they own Killzone. They own like Medal of Honor or like a SOCOM, right? But they don't use these games. They just don't care about. Now all of a sudden they care about first-person shooters because Microsoft is about to buy Activision Blizzard. But when your fans were begging you to make a first-person shooter again and you said no, now all of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just hilarious that they're switching up like this. They don't care. They haven't. The reason why they haven't made a first-person shooter in so long is because they were just paying Call of Duty to give exclusive content. They're like, listen, we don't feel like making a Call of Duty, so why don't we just pay COD to like have exclusive game modes and maps and stuff on our platform? Sony is just pathetic here, dude. It's pretty ridiculous. But look, like I said, and this is just all that's come out in the past couple of days. We will see what happens in the future. Nobody has any real inside sources until it's reported. But the final decision to see if there will be an expanded investigation is March 1st, 2023. The deal is, set to close in the summer of 2023. So we will see if it closes peacefully or if it takes a lot longer. We'll see what happens. But honestly, my prediction is it's going to close. Oh, man, that was a handful. I just can't believe that it's come down to this, though. Like, they're actually just resorting to fanboy arguments and just stuff you would see on Twitter. I mean, look at this. 5.1 million copies in its debut week, fastest selling first-party launch. Like, PlayStation is successful. It's going to be fine even if Xbox owns Activision, Blizzard. It really doesn't matter. And look at this. Scale up the stones on Sony at this point. I mean, this is just insane. Like, they're not pulling any punches. Look at this. I understand Sony's concern about the acquisition, but they are really reaching on a lot of stuff. They're saying a lot of nonsense to try and get this deal to happen. Like, literally all these reporters and stuff and Twitter personalities that actually like follow this stuff and cover this stuff. Like, look at this. Sony just raised the regional PS5 prices and pushed for $70 games, and then they have the balls to say this to regulators. Like, this is insane. They raised prices on everything, and then they're the ones saying, "Oh my God, but what if Xbox, raises prices?" Look at this. Ryan McCaffrey, IGN, he covers Xbox. So if Sony's "Woe is Me" lobbying campaign is actually successful all over one game, I could see Microsoft ultimately making things much worse for Sony by going at them at their home turf, buying Square Enix, Capcom, Atlas. And that's a good point. Like, if this deal somehow doesn't go through because Sony is saying "Woe is me," Microsoft's going to be upset. Phil Spencer is going to take the gloves off seriously and start spending a lot of that Microsoft money and say, okay, fine, we're buying Square Enix, we're buying Capcom, Sega, Atlas. We're going to buy everything that you like having deals on, and we're going to exclusivize. Trust me, Sony is making a huge mistake here. Like, Phil Spencer, I'm positive Phil Spencer is not going to make Call of Duty exclusive. He will keep it on Game Pass. He just wants the deal to go through. But the fact that it's coming down to this is pretty insane, because now we're going to see what Xbox and Sony are really going to do when the light is on and everybody's watching the deal happen. But that is it for the video. That was a long video, man. Oh my goodness, so much to talk about. What do you think about this deal? What do you think about just everything? I mean, this is just madness. Let me know in the comment section, though, and we will be covering this all Thanksgiving week and throughout the holidays as it unfolds. But happy Thanksgiving and enjoy the holidays.